Hello everyone, and welcome back to Inside ArtScroll, where the books you read and the people who write them come to life. Today we are joined by Rabbi Naftali Horowitz, who serves as the Managing Director and the Financial Advisor with JP Morgan. I got to start right away. What in the world does that mean? What does a Managing Director and a Financial Advisor with JP Morgan do?
So Managing Director is just a status of title, how successful you are within the company. It's kind of like the highest level, and it's Baruch Hashem. And I advise people on their wealth, mostly large financial institutions, organizations, not-for-profits, and wealthy people.
Now we are here, and we're going to get to it, to discuss your brand new book titled You, a very fascinating book. And I want to get to some specifics in the volume. But first, give us a background on how someone like you, who went through the traditional yeshiva system, and I'd like you to talk about that, ended up working with JP Morgan. So where did you grow up, and what was your background?
So I grew up in Borough Park. I come from a rabbinic Hasidic family. I left yeshiva because I felt that my place was in the world and to be mashpia on people in a different way.
Now, when you say you left yeshiva, you're talking about post-marriage?
Post-marriage, post-kailo.
Post-kailo. So as a bacher, where did you learn?
So as a bacher, I learned in Stalin.
Okay.
Then I went from Mesivta to Rav Paler. And then I learned by Rosh Shlomo Feivel Shustel. And
was that in Torah Tamima?
That was in Torah Tamima, correct.
Okay. I'm just mentioning because he was my Rebbe in Torah Tamima as well.
There you go. And
could
then
be a few years difference.
And then I was zeicha to learn by Rav David Soloveitchik Zal Zayin Gesund. Should have a complete refuah shalema.
Amen. And then you came back to America?
Came back to America, went to Lakewood for a number of years. I earned my bachelor's degree and master's degree in Talmudic law, which lo and behold is all you need to get into Wall Street, as long as you're willing to do the work and read the books and study.
And that's good to know for our viewers.
Very good to know. I speak about this in my lectures all the time. People think that, you know, you don't have an Ivy League college degree, you can't go places. It's not true. We say if you can figure out Reb Chaim al Rambam, then a corporate earnings report is a piece of cake.
Well,
Baruch Hashem. So,
did you receive some kind of what we would call an English general studies secular education over the years that you felt helped you later on, or was it something that was more innate, that you had that ability to write and to speak and to comprehend whatever it is that you were exposed to post-kailo?
So no, the answer is I went through traditional yeshivas. I read books. I read a lot of books. To do what I do, you need to know a lot. So I do not waste time reading, as we say, Narishkeit. I read textbooks, and I think as a child, I always was fascinated with the English language. Like if I had a Rebbe in English, it would be Rebbe Berelwein. Not only was I fascinated by history, but I used to write down all the hard words that he would say in all of his history lectures and his books, and I would look them up in the dictionary. And then I would try to incorporate them into my language as I was speaking, and I think that's how I picked up the English language.
And you've seen it pay off for you.
Absolutely. I mean, people do judge you by your vocabulary, especially in my world. You are working with sophisticated Ivy League college grads, so you can't have that yeshivish sprach, so to speak, falling out of your mouth.
And as they say, you never get a second chance to make a first impression.
That's correct.
So
that's correct.
The way you speak and the way you present yourself is the way they're going to view you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, growing up, what did your parents do?
My father was a diamond cutter. My father worked very, very hard. Struggled terribly to make a living, which is part of the reason I wrote this book and part of why I do what I do. Watching my father struggle and watching the worries of the house, of not having enough, was a very big influence on my upbringing and a big part of who I am.
And when you made that choice to leave Kail and to take a vocation, how did you choose what you did?
So my first job was working actually in the printing world. I worked for my shver. And I was pushed into that job by necessity. My father needed somebody to do sales, and sales was
what type of business is that?
Printing
Commercial
and
printing?
graphics. Yes, yes.
And
Books.
What was your role there?
So I became a salesperson. I became the salesperson.
And where did you kind of gravitate naturally to sales? Was
Not
it
at
something
all.
that
It was the last thing in the world I wanted to do.
Uh-huh.
But it turns out it's what Rebbeinu Shalom wanted me to do. And I'm kind of tenacious in that way, that even though I did not have the natural inkling for it, I pushed myself and I just didn't give up, and I kept at it until I became really good at it.
So you become good at sales, you feel comfortable in your own skin, which I think is a very important part of it.
Correct.
And what was the next step?
So I sort of realized after a couple of years I wasn't going to stay in the printing business. It just didn't offer enough of an intellectual challenge for me. And I kept davening for the Rebbeinu Shalom to open up something for me. That something opened up when I was picked up by a financial firm, corporate finance, which is not what I do today.
Mm-hmm. You applied for the job? Did someone seek you out?
Somebody sought me out. Somebody who took notice of me sought me out, and I was thrust into the world of finance. So I spent about 5 years in corporate finance. Enjoyed
Which means in layman's terms, what
working
did that involve?
with public companies.
Okay.
Very different of what I do today. I was doing all kinds of structuring of their stock issuances and their plans and things like that. With
no formal college degree in that field?
Not at all, no.
So you're kind of learning on the fly?
Learning on the fly. And what that job did for me is it really pushed me to up the ante on my communication skills, presentation skills, because I was meeting with chief financial officers, corporate secretaries of large public companies. I mean, I had some really large companies that were my clients, big Fortune 500. So there I was, a yeshiva bacher, and sitting with the board of Coca-Cola.
You ever laugh to yourself and say, this is funny?
It's funny until you realize that everything is funny. Because the Rebbeinu Shalom can make anything happen.
Exactly.
And I write about that in the book all the time, that a person can do anything if they believe in themselves as a conduit and a vehicle for the Rebbeinu Shalom to express Kiddush Hashem and success in the world. So I'm a living example of that, because everything about my life is Shlo Al Pi Derech HaTeva, and certainly where I am in my career.
Right.
So I spent 5 years doing that. It was difficult because I was on a plane a lot. I was flying all over the country, meeting with companies in San Diego and Wyoming and places that you would never go to in a million years. Certainly no kosher food. I was once snowed in to Boise, Idaho, before there was a Chabad house there, and I had to exist on apples and oranges, and I found some kosher pretzels for 3 days until the airport opened up again. Mm-hmm. But I started davening again. I said, Rebbeinu Shalom, I don't think this is it. I need something else. I need something else. And then again, I was sought out by my former firm to become a financial advisor to wealthy people, something I had absolutely no knowledge of. And they invested in me and they trained me, and Baruch Hashem, and from there I went to JP Morgan.
Now, any particular memories from those early years? Maybe a gaffe of yours or something humorous? Any particular story that stands out?
There's a lot of them. There were many defining moments in the early part of my career, which I speak about a lot in my lectures. Things that taught me to take a completely different track than perhaps the other people that I was competing against were doing. I remember one of my largest clients using the word, "I'm disappointed." And I remember how that felt. And I remember sort of like saying to myself, my number one goal is never to disappoint anybody.
So they were saying to you, they were disappointed
Correct.
in you and your performance?
I delivered a printed piece, and the client looked at it and they were disappointed. And that hurt. And I think that propelled me to work extra hard, never to have a client say, "I'm disappointed." And that's true in my business today, especially. That was a very big defining moment. Another defining moment I remember was meeting with a very large public company, and I was pitching their business. And the CFO looked at his watch and he says, "Mr. Horowitz, you've been here 15 minutes and all you've talked about is your competition. I have another 5 minutes for you. Would you like to tell me anything about your company?" And it was just so impactful. Needless to say, I did not win that piece of business. But it was one of the most defining moments of my career where I said, wow, you can't talk about the competition. You can only talk about what you're offering. And this is what Chafetz Chaim says all the time. Lashon Hara carries into the workplace just like it does everywhere else. Where do we have a right to put down our competition? So these were very, very important defining moments for me, where I'd say that after that, I did everything differently. There's so many. I mean, perhaps if I write another book, talk about
your autobiography. Maybe.
I'll talk about all that.
Right. Now, as a visibly Orthodox Jew, a Ben Torah, did you hit roadblocks on the way to where you are today?
So it's funny, I write about that in my book as well. Of course I did, but I didn't notice them because I just wasn't gyrus them, as we say. I've always believed that, first of all, if you know what you do and you do it well and you make a good impression, most people will look past a beard, a yarmulke. And if they don't, so be it. It wasn't bashert. So I don't really make a big deal about it. I could tell you an interesting story that I once went to a meeting in Oneida, New York. There's a famous silverware company called Oneida.
Right.
So Oneida is a public company. They're located in Oneida, New York. You would never know where Oneida, New York is. You fly to Rochester, and then you just get in the car and you drive and drive and drive. And the person that I went with was somebody from my company who was not that from, but from enough that he shouldn't have done what he did. And as we walked into the meeting, he asked me to take off my yarmulke. And I never take off my yarmulke for a meeting. I never did. And I said, absolutely not. I will not take off my yarmulke. And as we walked into the meeting, he grabbed the yarmulke off my head and put it into his pocket. And it was the most disturbing thing that has happened to me in my career, I have to say. The woman walks in, I still remember her name, and she was wearing a cross at Salem that was literally this big. So she sat down across from us. Here we are, two from Jews without wearing a yarmulke, and here's a Catholic woman portraying proudly her religion. And I walked out of that meeting, and I asked the person back for my yarmulke, and I refused to ever do a meeting with this person again. But the point was that we Yidden, when we act the way we should, we're ethical, we're honest, we speak the truth, and we know what we're talking about, and we make an impression, we should be wearing two yarmulkes, not one, right? Taking off our yarmulkes never occurred to me. I could never do it. It's not possible, and I can't believe that that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom would want for me to be successful. So I proudly walk the hallways of J.P. Morgan. There aren't that many managing directors in the entire firm, but we have once a year a get-together, and I'm proud that I believe I'm the only yarmulke in the room. And I'm proud of it. I think that's why I'm in the workplace.
And I was going to ask you if you're ever in uncomfortable positions because of it, but you're saying you're not even noticing it. You're so past it.
I'm not even noticing it. I don't think about it. And I write about this in my book. The more self-conscious you are,
right.
The more you're going to project that. And then the person's going to pick it up. If you're proud of who you are and you have no embarrassment or anything to be sorry for, the person will look past it.
Right. They believe in the innate goodness of people. Most people are, right? That's you.
I absolutely believe in that.
Right.
I absolutely believe in that. And I think that a lot of what people claim as anti-Semitism is just their demyonis or their excuse for why things aren't working out. I just don't think it's been an issue for me.
But I think that's very inspiring, not only for those in the corporate world, but anyone in any interaction with those outside of the Orthodox Jewish community in general, and those who do work with those outside of our faith, that it's all about how you carry yourself and how you project yourself. And in most situations, listen, there are always some, sour apples, but in most situations, you'll get that back coming right back to you.
I give credit to this to my father, Zechron Uvracha. My father did not judge people in that way. I remember coming off from yeshiva once, and repeating something somebody had said, one of my friends, all goyim are bad, all goyim are robbers, or something silly that a child would say. And my father sat me down and he says, "Is that true?" I said, "Yes, I think it's true." So my father started saying, "How about Peter the gardener? Is he a robber? Is he bad?" No, I said, "Peter the gardener, he's very good," because I knew Peter the gardener.
Right.
"How about Sam, the mailman?" And I said, "Oh no, I like Sam. Sam's a great guy." "What about Muriel, who takes care of Zadie, the nurse?" And my father showed me how ridiculous that was to just stereotype and make a blanket statement like that. And these things, my father left an impression on me. My father was a person who saw the innate good in every human being. And not just human beings, cats and dogs and bugs. My father wouldn't let us kill a cockroach. If we can catch it and let it outside, he would require that that's what we did. He said it's a living thing. So these are chinuch things that were instilled in me.
So it definitely starts with the messages we give our children. I could hear it in your voice, just the way you're speaking about the messages that your father gave you. It obviously stayed with you, and you carried that now into the corporate world and really putting those messages from your youth into action now. Today you work as a financial advisor. You're managing millions of dollars for very wealthy people.
Right.
Do you have trouble sleeping at night?
I used to. 2008 was the hardest period for me, where I watched hundreds of millions of dollars evaporate in weeks. I felt a tremendous achrayus.
Right.
I was carrying a huge burden. I wasn't sleeping, and it took a big toll on me. There's no question about it. But I realized that this was just requiring me to go back and double down and triple down on my emunah b'tachon, and truly reframe what my role was for my clients. As one of my rabbanim said to me, he says, "Nobody hires you because they think you're a navi." So none of us know the future. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. So over the years, I've gotten much better at it. But there's no question that it's a double-edged sword. The more serious you take this job, the better you are at it, but the bigger the burden you carry. And I manage hundreds of millions of dollars is tzedakah money, that is mammon hegdish, for very large institutions. And
that's invested money that they invest.
Invested money that they invest.
And they're counting on a return in order to make it
counting
worthwhile.
on a return. Projects are built based on these returns.
Wow.
And it's a huge achrayus. There's no question about it. It keeps me davening very, very hard.
Right, it's a huge balance to take your job as seriously as humanly possible without taking that home with you into your personal life.
Correct. Absolutely.
A lot of mussar learning, a lot of self-introspection.
A lot of mussar learning, a lot of self-introspection, which is how I was able to write a book.
Right. Now, do you have a relationship directly with these clients, or? Yeah,
yes,
you do. You build personal relationships with them.
Every one of them.
Because they're trusting you.
Absolutely.
With their hard-earned dollars.
The relationships are beyond the dollars. Many of them are Jewish. They're mostly not from, but I've unfortunately been at the bedside of several clients.
Really? That's how close you are to them.
As they breathed their last, I said vidui with several. I've eulogized many. I've taught some clients' children how to lane.
Wow.
I've really, I've been at the bedside of clients. Yeah, I've gotten doctors. I've gotten help to people when they were sick. Most of my clients have become like family to me.
You become like family. It sounds like there's a kiruv component to it that
Huge.
comes by default.
No question.
And you're also becoming their therapist on some level, right?
Well, my job is 50% therapy. And it's unbelievable how, I remember in 2008, it wasn't just Jews in my office that were coming, because people had literally the rug pulled out from under them. The whole financial system was cratering and crumbling, and people had built this whole dimion of security and financial security on nothing, right? And all of a sudden, one day, it was all crumbling. And it doesn't just it affects everybody. And people were coming to my office because they needed a clergyman They didn't need financial advice. These were colleagues of mine, Jewish and non-Jewish. I remember I taught a class at my former firm. I taught Rabbi Chanan's mimer on the Great Depression. It's an unbelievable mimer. The Jewish Observer did a great job of translating it into English. And I gave out copies. And I showed them the wisdom of Torah, how it explained the Great Depression, which was literally, 2008 was a mirror of it, what was going on with the financial crisis, with money movement and velocity of money and everything that he explains over there about azuz and putting betachin in money versus the Rebbeinu Shalom. And when I finished the lecture, I was blown away. The room was full. There were at least 10 non-Jews who came to that lecture. And they couldn't get over it, the wisdom of Torah, how it explained it. And what I taught them was that they have to reorient themselves with what they rely upon, which is, it can't be just about your 401k, your bank account, or your pension plan.
So you've taken the wealth of experience that you have and you've, I guess, condensed it into a book. So tell us about the process of putting together the book. Why write a book? And how long it took you? What was involved?
So why write a book is a question I asked myself as I was writing the book. Why am I doing this?
Like most authors.
Why am I doing this? It's interesting. The idea to write the book came from a very good friend of mine who's a noted author, Naftali Horowitz. He came up to me after a lecture in Lakewood a couple of years ago, and he said, who's publishing your book? I said, I don't have a book. He goes, oh no, you're going to have a book. And he just kept at it. He kept emailing me and driving me crazy. You must write a book, you must write a book. One day he dragged me down to ArtScroll, and I met with Gedalia and Avram Biederman, and they said, you must write a book. It took an enormous amount of time to write the actual book, and it was time I didn't have. But I thought about it, and I said, look, people come to my office all the time. People come to my home for advice. Personal advice, career advice, which ultimately becomes marriage advice and life advice. Mm-hmm. And they've always said to me, what can I learn? Where can I go? I need to develop tools. So I would, I'd give them parts of Chavis Lavavis and learn this in Nefesh Chaim and learn this here and learn this there. And I came to realize that really what I would love to do is just say, here, read this. But that thing to me didn't exist. I had to compile my knowledge from so many different places. Mm-hmm.
Like a manual almost.
A manual. So
would you call this a Dale Carnegie book? Would it be a self-help book? If there's a genre, right. Is there a genre, or did you just create?
I mean, I think it's contemporary mussar. Yes, it's a self-help book. One of the reasons that I wrote this book was that people were going to Dale Carnegie. Chassidish people were going for weekends to Dale Carnegie and spending Shabbos in a hotel to hear a guy teach them how to live their lives, how to develop motivation, resilience, tenacity, and things. Finding a life's mission was not meant to be learned from somebody like Dale Carnegie. We have it. This is our Messiah. Mm-hmm. So, and I just realized that I need something that I can give people. And as much time as it took to write the book, I realized how much time it's going to save me in having to teach all of this to so many different people one-on-one, and even in lectures, because how much can you get in a lecture an hour? You just can't get that much out. So, I decided this book has to be written. It wasn't really hard to write the book. I never wrote a book before. The information was in me to a very large extent. The difficult part about writing the book was organizing it in a fashion where I really began at the beginning and built my way up. Mm-hmm. As I told my editor, I wrote 17 chapter ones. Mm-hmm. Because the first chapter I wrote, I thought was chapter 1, and then I wrote it, I realized it's not chapter 1, and I wrote a chapter before that, and then a chapter before that. So I really started 3/4 of the way into the book, and then worked my way back. Mm-hmm. And I hope that the reader will find the natural building progression of the growth of self from the beginning throughout the book. That was the challenging part. The second really challenging part was finding the right editor. It took about a year. So the book writing itself was about 6 to 8 months. I rewrote it several times. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, as I say in my book.
And you said you didn't have the time to do it, so when did you do it?
I did it at all kinds of crazy hours. I did it at night. I did it early in the morning. I did it whenever I had time, and I would scribble stuff down and then just go back and write the book. And Motzei Shabbos was a big time for me. I'd lock myself 6-7 hours in my office until the wee hours of the morning, just writing and writing and writing and writing. And then the summer, when the market tends to be quieter and clients aren't as active, I did a lot of writing in the summer. So Baruch Hashem, and I went through several editors until I found the right one.
Now you talk about starting at the beginning. What would you say is the beginning? What is the building block, the basis for everything else that you bring later in the book?
So the beginning, interesting, the beginning, which I thought was the beginning, was what is the definition of success? The cover says that it's a Torah path to a life of success. So what is success? It's always good to know what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
It's interesting that people don't really have a definition of success, and for some people it's a lot of money. But then they make a lot of money and they realize they're not happy, they don't feel successful. So where did I go wrong? The answer is, if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, it's very difficult to achieve it. So that is the beginning of the book, but it's not really the beginning of the book, because there had to be a beginning before that. The beginning before that is to uproot the mindset of, I can't be successful. So my early chapter is basically taking head on those things that people may use as excuses to Rutzim as to why whatever's going to follow in this book does not apply to me. That's the Sitra Acha, that's the Satan, that's the voice inside that's telling you, this book may be for other people, but it isn't for you.
And you
You're
actually
just
have
mediocre.
that. Right, I'm sorry. You have that format in the book at the beginning where you say the Satan says.
I literally
and
take.
the response is.
I take every teretz I've ever heard from myself and for other people, and I just tackle it head on. Because if you can't uproot that up front, you may not get to read the chapter 2, or they may read chapter 2, but they still have that voice of doubt inside of them.
Wouldn't you say that the summary of it all really, at the end of the day, boils down to the very, very core principles of mussar, such as Machai Vasa Ba'olamai? That's really what it is. Why are we here? What does Hashem want us to do? It comes out to the very, very foundation of our faith.
Correct.
And that will ultimately guide everything else. Is that too elementary, or is that really it?
It's a beginning. It's a good beginning, but there's a lot more than that. This book goes into things like will. What is will? Where does it come from? I get it. I know why I'm here, but I have no desire. I have no will. I have no motivation. I have no confidence to carry it through, as an example. So, yes, the foundation is, why are you here? It's funny. I was talking to a very chashuv person yesterday, and he said to me, he says, that is a question that he's not sure he can answer. And again, as I mentioned in my book, every corporation has a mission statement. They know why they're in business. JP Morgan knows why they're in business. Some people, they go to work every day, they have children, they marry them off, they do all the things that they do, but they don't really know why they're here and what their mission is. So having a clear mission in life gives you so many advantages, such as, should I do this or should I do that? Well, that doesn't speak to your mission. Is that why you're here? Right? When I see people who are just floundering, generally they can't answer that question. Why are you here? What are you meant to achieve? So the beginning of the book lays that foundation, but there's a lot more that comes beyond that.
But would you say that these are fundamental principles that really should be inculcated in children and then adolescents,
yes,
so that they don't have to find out at age 45, 55, or 65 that they've been living a life void of reason and void of purpose and void of a goal?
Absolutely. That's why Mrs. Judy Dick said the next book I write has to be for teens. Yes, even mussar. Who learned mussar in yeshiva? It was 20 minutes before dinner, and it was the say that you just wanted to get out of. And
right.
I remember until I went into business and I started dealing with the anxieties and the stresses of earning a living and everything else that comes with it, raising a family, that I found myself running back to the Sfarim Shank and taking out Chayos Levavos and reading it over and over and over. and realizing that I had put my best friend away in the shelf for 15 years or 10 years, whatever it was, and never opened it. And now I realized how much I needed. And then, you expanded beyond that to all the Svarim HaKadoshim that we have that really teach you how to live successful lives. The challenge is that not everybody is able to pull all that information, or more importantly, they don't know how to take mussar and make it applied mussar, to bring it into their everyday life. And this is what I'm trying to do in the book. I'm trying to show the reader that On Your Svarim Shak are the best self-help books you could ever imagine.
I think also adolescents are not at the stage of life yet to appreciate why it's so vital. It's more about getting through the days and the years. They're not facing life-altering challenges, hopefully not.
Exactly.
It's only later on when a person is at a crossroads, they're dealing with marriage, chinuch, parnasa, health, and things like that, that they really start opening their eyes and saying, I really need direction.
Correct.
And many people, unfortunately, not to anyone's fault, but they may not have a rebbe or a mashkiach or a mentor of some sort to guide them and give them the tools that you're providing here.
Exactly.
Now, in the book, you use the term self-actualization, which jumped out at me. What does that mean, and how do we apply it?
Self-actualization means when a person expresses fully their kaiches hanefesh. The Rebbeinu Shalom gave us all talents. The Rebbeinu Shalom gave us a mission. Self-actualization means bringing that, leaving this world knowing that you were the best version of you that you could be. And this is the dormant you that's inside. The book is called You with capital letters because there's a you with small letters and then there's a you. So the neshama comes to this world, it knows it has a mission, it even knows what that mission is. The guf has no idea. And the communication channels between the guf and neshama are not the best ones, right? And the guf makes a lot of noise and the neshama is very quiet. When a person expresses the true self, whether it's in an act of tzedakah, whether it's teaching another person something, whether it's a good Shemona Esrei, whatever it is, there's this euphoric feeling that comes forth. They know that they just were who they really are. And that is self-actualization. It's a feeling of deep meaningfulness and fulfillment. And the more experiences we can have of this, the more we know that we're on the right track to what I would call self-actualization.
A lot of what you just said and what's included in the book is related to psychology. It's a lot of psychology. Would you say that the book is solely based on Torah sources and how to apply the modern, contemporary principles of psychology? Is that what it is? Or did you take from different professionals? How would you apply it as far as the sourcing of the content of the book?
So it's a very good question. When I gave the book to Rabbi Avram Chaim 4 years old, and he read the whole book. He had just had surgery and he gave me an askama on it. He called me up. He says, I have one taina on you, Naftali. I said, what? He says, you don't quote any psychology books, any psychology sources. I said, but Rabbi Avram Chaim, I never read a psychology book. So the answer is no, I've never read a psychology book. I don't think there's a reason to read a psychology book. I think the Chavis Levavos is the best psychology book ever written. To read things from Apikarsim and to try to, again, come up with an orientation of self using a secular source is running your engine on the wrong fuel. So the answer is every single thing in that book is Torah sourced 100%. I had Gedolim go through this book page by page to get an askama. It took months to get askamas because this is a book that people could be afraid of. Where is this coming from? Right. But the book speaks for itself. Every single thing is sourced in Torah.
As Chazal say,
it's all there. It's mamish all there. It's mamish unbelievable, and it's authentic. It's not this artificial things that somebody's going to read in a book written by an apikairos.
Right. What's interesting is that you're dealing with very weighty topics, but as I was going through the book, it's very light.
Very light.
Very non-threatening.
Correct.
And you break it down into very understandable questions that we all have.
Right.
These are issues that we all thought about.
Correct.
Some we have answers to, some not.
Correct.
And that's why I think the format of the book is fantastic. Now, would you say that someone in their teens could read it and comprehend it? And would you say that the book is for men, women of all ages?
I don't know how many teens will comprehend some of it, because you pointed out very correctly before, I deal with problems or challenges which come later in life. The same exact ideas could be rewritten to deal with teen challenges. Mm-hmm. Self-esteem, self-orientation, who am I, the whole trying to fit in mindset, the feelings of inferiority, and so on and so forth that plague children in school. I'm not academically up to par, I don't have as many friends as somebody else. So I think that the mashalim and the kinds of language would have to be changed for a teenager, typical teenager, to appreciate it. But the idea is it's Torah, so it's applicable to all ages. The book is light. I am Betzim, that's the way I lecture. You know, you have to teach people at that level. And Baruch Hashem, the Rebbeinu Shalom gave me the koyach that I can take something somewhat complex and try to explain it. Some of those chapters had to be written 4 or 5 times, especially the chapter on will, which is was a very, very deep, complicated, Kabbalistic chapter. But I rewrote it 7 or 8 times until it came to the point where I could show it to an editor, and she says, yeah, I understood every word of it. Mm-hmm. So.
Now you talk about lecturing. What types of groups do you get to lecture on a regular basis? And what is the topic of the lecture usually? Is it business oriented, or is it more of this type of life guidance? Life coaching, right. We could call it life skills. So
it's interesting. Most of my lectures are a front. They're a front for come learn how to earn more money, mm-hmm. Which is why people come. Success, sales, confidence. And then people walk out and they say, I learned more Torah in that. But they realize that there's a perfect marriage between the two. So I lecture Baruch Hashem around the world. This is my mitzvah. I don't charge for my lectures. Maybe the organizations charge, but I've lectured to tens of thousands of people, Baruch Hashem, over the last 5 to 6 years or more. A lot of Hasidic communities ask me to come, Belz, Satma, Klosenberg, Skver, and others. It's to build people up. It's to give them hope. It's to teach them tools so that they could be successful people. Whether it's successful people in business or whether it's a successful person in your community, a successful person is built a certain way, and the tools that we need to teach them to be successful is going to essentially work across their life. So I think a lot of it is that I could show them, look at me, nothing special. I didn't go to college. I didn't have any magical upbringing. I had, Baruch Hashem, a beautiful upbringing, but I didn't come from money. I didn't come from anything. Anybody, every person can make something of themselves. And every person was put here to make something of themselves. So I think some of that is just I'm willing to share my foibles and my mistakes and my mishigasin and the fears and inhibitions that I had, and every shortcoming that I have, literally, had to be dealt with before I went into that book. So it gives people hope. Like the goal is, if he could do it, why can't I do it?
What is a memorable mistake or egregious error that you made that maybe taught you something about yourself and about bouncing back?
Well, I think the mistakes that I had early on are the same mistakes a lot of people have. I spent too much time worrying about what other people thought, about what other people thought of me. What kind of impression was I making? Was I fitting in? These are childish mindsets that can occupy kinna, jealousy, taiva, and kavod. Those are 3 things that put a person into a detrimental mindset. And you can spend your whole life in those mindsets, worrying about this. Does this person think your car is nice enough? Does this person think you're smart enough? Does this person have more than you, less than you? And you spend your whole life occupied on the externalities of your life versus what's internal. And I suffered from this terribly as a child. I wanted to fit in, I wanted to be popular, I wanted this, I wanted that. Until one day I realized, what for? Where's this all going to get me? And So these are things that I remember as a child having moments where I stopped and realized that none of this really matters at the end of the day. And when I entered sales, the biggest detriment to sales is fear of rejection. Someone's going to say no to you.
Right.
I had to mentally get over that. Who cares? What difference does it make if they say no to you? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't translate to anything about you. So our biggest obstacle in life is in here. It's how we think. It's how we feel. If we could change that, then everything about our lives change.
It's amazing listening to you because there's an interesting dichotomy here. Your occupation at JP Morgan is focused on making people more money.
Correct.
Whereas your primary message, and that is we're talking about externals, chitzonius.
Correct.
And your whole message is that what really matters is the pneumius, is the internal.
Correct.
You ever think to yourself, you know what, I'm on one side I'm being pulled in the JP Morgan direction.
Right.
On the other side, the truth is the diametric opposite.
Right.
So you kind of have a unique balance here.
So it's interesting. So I don't think it's a steer at all. In fact, I speak to my clients this way all the time. Client calls me up and says he heard about this and this investment and he's thinking of doing it. And I say, but you realize how risky it is? And he says, yes, it's very risky. And I said, but let me ask you a question. If you're wrong, how much pain will you experience at the loss? Versus if you're right, will this change your life even an iota? Mm-hmm. Does it really matter at this point how much money you have? And I speak to clients like that all the time. I try to reorient them for the purpose of money. And in my book, I have some examples of, unfortunately, people who didn't get it. Mm-hmm. And who just kept amassing and amassing and amassing. Money, in the words of Reb Schwab, the reason why on Motzei Shabbos we say Zareinu v'chaspenu yarba k'choil, right? Asks Reb Schwab, how do you take something as holy and as eternal as children and put it together with money? The Teretz is we're talking about money that's put to good uses. Listen, money built ArtScroll. Money put out the Schottenstein Talmud. Money builds yeshivas. Money has incredibly intrinsic power when it's directed in the right direction. So I see money creation, when it's done for the right purpose, as Avodas Hashem. And I try to teach my clients to think that way, to say, at some point, it's purposeless to create more wealth unless you can find the purpose for it. And I have these conversations with my clients. These are existential conversations to try to get them to give more tzedakah and to do the right thing while they're still alive. And sometimes I'm successful, and unfortunately, sometimes I'm not.
You are in a very unique position there where you could literally guide people toward eternity or to nebuch wasting their lives.
Exactly.
And leaving their money to some useless foundation or something of that sort, which is really...
It goes even beyond that. It's that money destroys generations. When it's not dealt with, when children grow up spoiled and unbridled and they know there's endless amounts of money coming their way one day, where's the motivation for that child to make anything of themselves? And I encourage my clients to educate their children, to withhold from their children. I had a client who called me up from a Porsche dealership, and he tells me he's buying his son a Porsche because his son is graduating college. I said, what's left if you buy him the Porsche now? You've basically taken every motivation away from this child. You're giving him the ultimate prize in his world. For what? For graduating college? You can see how money could destroy or money could build. Mm-hmm. I try.
Now you've been involved, besides for advising wealthy people, money management for regular people.
Correct.
Now this is something that I've I don't want to call it a pet peeve, but I've thought about it a lot. Mesila helps people spend the money they have.
Correct.
But what if the amount of money you have is simply not enough? There's only so many ways you could cut a meager salary. And that leads me to a question that I would love to present to you. In the frum world today, to support a family, you need a lot of money. I don't even want to throw out a number because everyone is different and people live on different levels. But what worked for someone in the 90s, and what would someone be, if someone would be considered wealthy if they made $100,000 in the 90s, today they're not making it.
Correct.
Housing, tuition, weddings, postmarital support, insurance. We could go down the whole list.
Yeah.
Some people would say that the financial system in the frum world is broken.
Right.
I've heard stories myself, families upon families that on the outside, they put up a good facade, they seem to be doing okay. Maybe they make it through their child's school years, and then it comes to marriage and everything falls apart, weddings and things of that sort. What eitzah do you have to the average breadwinner who's just trying their hardest? They might have even gone to college. They might even have a degree, and it still won't make a difference because they're not earning enough money to support themselves as frum erliche people. What do we tell those people?
So your pet peeve is my pet peeve. It's a lot. It's a lot of what I lecture about, and it's a very big motivator and why I go out there and speak to people. I created what's called the Income Enhancement Program. And I put together a series of articles and seminars to teach people how to earn more money. So the Income Enhancement Seminar, Baruch Hashem, was very successful in Eretz Yisrael. It was being worked on in Lakewood for a while, but I think the whole kind of Masila in Lakewood is not what it used to be. So I agree with you. There are people who are living at their means, and they just don't have enough. So Masila is tackling those that are living above their means, which is unfortunately a larger percentage of the population than we think. And this goes back to what I was saying before about people living lives for other people. So the Masila program is meant to bring awareness to where perhaps we're living above your means. So I think that's the first thing. A person has to know what their means, what they can afford, and live at their means. Once they know what that is, and now they have a shortfall, at least they know what that shortfall is. And let me explain why that's important. There are people who spend because they figure, what difference does it make anyway? I don't have enough. So what's another $50? What's another $100? What's another $200? What's another car lease? What difference does it make if I'll buy new shoes, I won't buy new shoes? The whole house is built on cards anyway. And when a person lives that way, there's no motivation. But suppose I showed a person that you're only $300, $400, $600 a month away from where you are. Now I say to this person, you can go back and you could start revisiting all of your expenses, and let's see if we can close that gap. Now they have a concrete, tangible number that they're working towards. That is a motivation for them. Otherwise, it's who cares? So that's step number one. Income enhancement comes down to what's written in this book, self-enhancement. So many times, people are under-earning because they're under-living, because they're underachieving, because they're underappreciating who they are and what their kaiches are. They're falling victim to the voice of, I can't, someone else could. That's not me. Someone could be successful at this. Someone could get that raise. Someone could work their way up in the company. Somebody can take on a second profession. Somebody can change professions completely. But look at me already. I'm 32. I'm 41. It doesn't matter what age it is. And that is what this book was meant to uproot. And it's not just about money. It's about davening for the Amid. It's about talking at a Sheva Brachas. It's about starting a Chesed organization. It's about all those latent talents and koiches that we have inside of us that we've just forgotten and saying, it's not me, it's not me. I am what you see, right? So many times people come up to me in the streets, in shul, and they say, I came to your seminar 3 years ago. I quit my job because I realized I was literally at a dead end. I took that leap. A guy came over to me in Pomegranate once, and he showed me the whole line of herrings and salads in Pomegranate he supplies. And he said he built a beautiful business because he changed his mindset about what was possible for his life. He left his job, his salary job that he was starving from, and he went and he launched this business, and he told me, Baruch Hashem, he's being wildly successful. I can't tell you how many stories I have had and how many experience of people who started businesses because they changed that mindset. So I try in my seminars to teach people.
Do you believe that every single person could be matzliach, whatever hatzlach is defined as? Do you think every person could be matzliach, especially when we're talking about materially?
Yes.
Financially, aren't there always the idiots, the beinanis, ziburis, aren't
Yes.
there always the la yutzlachs of society?
It's in my book. I tell everybody the same thing. There will always be, the Chavis Alvava says this, the other mussar say there are always going to be givers and takers. Amuna betachin means I will not be from the takers. Those that step up, the Eiv Yisrael, the Abdurrab says the word Amuna comes from the Lashon Hamshacha. Those that step up and say, I believe that I can be from the givers. Why should somebody else be able to give and not me? Those people ultimately will become givers. They will not be takers. Will there be takers? Yes. But let it not be you.
Mm-hmm.
Let it not be you. A person has to have that betachon and amun and the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebbeinu Shalom meant for them to support their family and to live their lives successfully.
Now, people say that money can't solve all problems. But other people say, but money can solve many problems. And that, going back to our shared pet peeve, what I've heard from a therapist who said that most of the cases that come to him on some level involve finances. And every problem, virtually every problem, or challenge, I don't want to call it a problem, call it a challenge. Kids at risk, shidduchim, maybe not health, but a lot of other things, ultimately are exacerbated when there's a lack of finances. If someone has a kid at risk and they don't have the money
Correct.
to give the child the reinforcements that they need, things of that sort. Within marriages also, when someone is financially tight, it creates a tremendous stress on the marriage and people suffer from it. And I always wondered, why is there not more of a focus on helping people, what you call income enhancement? If I ever see a convention and I look at the panels and I don't see one on Parnassa, I scratch my head. Right. This is a very fundamental issue that has to be constantly addressed. Correct. Now, I once brought this up to an Askin, right. And he said to me, Yitzi, what do you want us to give out money? You know, what do you want us to do? Right. So obviously giving out money is not the Eitzah, but there has to be creative ideas, whether it's tuition relief, housing relief, and there are tremendous organizations doing that. Right. But I always wonder why there isn't more being done. Now, I have a theory that the movers and shakers, the people who have the power of influence, are usually of the upper echelon of society, which by definition means that finances are not a challenge that they deal with, whereas right. other challenges, such as health, shidduchim, chinuch, they don't discriminate. It doesn't matter what echelon you're on. That's the way the Rebbeinu Shalom made the world. It will affect anyone. Whereas finances, by its very definition, those in positions of power and influence usually don't have that challenge. Maybe they're not understanding just how much the majority of Klal Yisrael is struggling financially. What do you say about that?
So you're talking very, very big macro problems that we have. But the first thing I would say is that I've seen just as many children at risk that are there because of too much money mm-hmm. as lack of money. There's no question that lack of money creates issues with regard to getting the child help. The first thing I would say is that the avir, the tone of a house is more important than how much money there is. There are children who grow up with very little and they don't feel lacking. There are children that grow up with enough and feel lacking. And it's incumbent on parents to make children feel safe and and this is the most difficult part of being a parent in today's generation, is keeping the stresses inside or behind the closed door between you and your wife. When the children see, chas v'shalom, the words that I once heard, s'shver tzayin ayid, as Ramosha Zatzal used to say, then they become at risk. And when they see that tuition and kosher food and yontif becomes a burden and a stress, why should they? Why should they? And I know this is a difficult challenge for people to make ends meet and not let that be the primary focus of the house, as we can't make ends meet. On the other hand, people that have money and they can give and give and give, they have to realize that this is a tremendous It's an achrayus. You're spoiling your child. You're putting the emphasis on the wrong things, and then those children grow up without purpose and without meaning, and they're also at risk. So I think that's the first thing that I would say, that this is a huge thing. As far as why not more is being done about it, is that it's not so simple. Like I said, how do you take a person who's in a dead-end job, who's afraid to make a career change, right, and doesn't believe in themselves? As I spoke at a seminar a few years ago, and I said that, you know, you have to look at your job as a ladder, and sometimes you have to get off that ladder. You went up 7 rungs, and you're not going any further. And at some point, they're going to throw you off the ladder because you're going to get too old and you're going to be earning too much. And somebody younger is going to come in and they're going to give them your job. They'll do you a favor. They'll give you 3 or 4 months to train the person in. And I always say, get off that ladder before someone pushes you off that ladder. And get on a new ladder, and a ladder that's taller and that has more potential. That's very, very scary. It's really scary. And the problem is, if you don't get used to, accustomed to doing this when you're younger, and you wake up when you're 45 or 50, and you want to make that first career change at that age, it's very, very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. So I encourage the younger people to take more risks, calculated risks. You speak it over with a gadol, you do your research, but start a business, go into the sales profession, which has much more potential than a salary job. I encourage a lot of people to go into sales for that reason. And that's put amunah b'tachin in the Rabbanah Shalom.
Sales could be scary because it's commission-based, right?
That's right.
And some people don't.
But there's no ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
I must have put thousands of people into the sales profession who would have never thought otherwise.
So are you saying that it has to do more with determination and breaking out of the box than acquiring the requisite skills?
Yes.
Where does skill play? Where do skills? Because I didn't hear from you at all say anything about education or skills or reading up on who knows what and broadening your knowledge.
That's a milsa de pshita, as we say. First, you have to believe you could do it, and you have to want to do it, and then you say, how do I do it? When I went into finance, I didn't just walk in and say, I'm here. I devoured books. Mm-hmm. I still devour books. I don't read Narishkeit. I don't have time for Narishkeit. I read Tachlis. So I speak about that all the time. You have to develop skills. You have to work on yourself. You have to know what your shortcomings are. If you have people skills, you have to refine them. Communication skills, listening skills, asking skills, storytelling skills, motivation, resiliency, all of these things. Mitzvah Shem, maybe I'll write another book. There's so much that goes into what I call human capital, which is what a person is in the workplace to develop. It makes the person a more complete individual. But it starts with, I'm going to make a change. Right now, every time I changed jobs, I was thrust into a vast ocean that I knew nothing about. It was scary. I had stomach aches. I literally couldn't eat for weeks. But I knew this, I have to do it. I had to be moyach shalat al alev, and I knew that I had to do it. Otherwise, I wasn't going to support my family because of it. So getting over those initial fears and inhibitions and all that is the first step. Now, good, now what do I do? And I train people how to do that. Go speak to people, develop a mentor. You need a Rebbe in this, in both a spiritual and a physical sense. Right? You have to have somebody who's guiding you and telling you this is a good book to read, this is what you should be working on, and so on and so forth.
So this is really career coaching. I know people who have gone through school, they've gotten schooling and degrees, and then they show up to get their job and they find out that particular field
Correct.
is saturated.
Correct.
And, chachamenu b'roshei,
right.
But how would they know? Because they got guidance to go take a course in whatever it is.
100%.
So sales, you feel, is something that has tremendous potential and growth.
Potential.
At the same time, there is obviously a risk because especially in the early stages, there's no guarantee as to what you're earning.
Correct.
But you're saying that's what you would call a calculated responsible risk.
Correct.
As opposed to something
See,
reckless.
The difference between sales and everything else is that in 2008, thousands of mortgage brokers lost their job. In 2001, thousands of computer programmers lost their job. And what happens is they had a skill that became antiquated or wasn't as needed as much as they as it was, right? There were just not that many mortgages being originated in 2009 as there was in 2007. Those that developed underlying skills, like sales, are able to port that skill to another profession. I developed my sales skills in the printing business. And then they went to the to corporate finance, and now it's in wealth management. And if Wall Street would have shut down one day and go completely out of business, I don't know, I guess I'd sell airliners, airplanes, or I don't know. It's a human capital skill. It's not a knowledge of a specific industry. If you were the biggest cassette tape salesman, today you're selling, I don't know what's, hard drives or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Your product went away.
Right.
So I encourage people to look at it that way. And the other thing about sales is that the older you get, the better you get. Your Rolodex grows, you refine your skills, everything gets better about you. You can't compare a 45-year-old salesperson to a 22-year-old salesperson.
So that's an interesting thing, because in many fields, people feel that older people kind of lose their touch, whereas
Correct.
you're saying in sales, you're honing your skills.
You're honing your skills.
And you're just getting better at it.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't matter. Age is a mila. As
It's a mila. When I worked in corporate finance, there was a man who was in his 70s, and they would have kept him until he was 100.
Wow.
Because he was so seasoned. I learned so much from him. This is a person who worked on himself and really. So look, the reason why there aren't more seminars about this is that the people that are successful, a lot of them, just don't know how to train other people to be successful. And really, my hope is that this book will give people the kernels of information to start the process and working on things like self-esteem and confidence and motivation and will, and to start recognizing that voice inside of each of us that keeps putting us down and dragging us into mediocrity or even worse, failure. And start recognizing what are those things that are holding us back and how do we unleash ourselves from them. And that I'm hoping that this book will start that conversation for people. And then they will take that and they will go back to the Svarim Shanks, or maybe more seminars will be developed to specifically deal with those things that are holding people back.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today, for the fount of information that you are, for all the information and advice you gave us. I'm sure many people are going to benefit from this book, from your lectures, and we are looking forward, Emirat Hashem, to another volume in which you'll address whatever hasn't been addressed in this book, but continued Hatzlach and all your wonderful work.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.